Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast with your host, Andrew Langer.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Federal Newswire's Lunch Hour Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Langer, and if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, our new solely named Lunch Hour YouTube channel, you know you can catch us, the audio version of the podcast, wherever you consume your fine or not so fine podcast content. And if you're listening to us on one of those podcast platforms, you know you can always see what's happening in studio by going and visiting that YouTube channel. But follow us on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I don't call it X. I don't think anybody calls it X, really. At Lunch Hour Pod on Twitter. Go and check us out there. We get all sorts of clips that come up from our interviews. It's a great place to be. And tell your friends and your family members and your family members' friends and your friends' family members how much you're enjoying the Lunch Hour Podcast. Very excited to bring our guest on. Very excited, not just because of the long-term work she's been doing, but also because of some of the breaking news this week about new, I'm going to call it a mandate, but it's a demandate, an unmandate is the best way to put it, because one of the things that drives me up the wall, I know drives her up the wall, is when you, Lord knows because I wouldn't buy a car with this, when you rent a car and you stop at a stoplight and the car shuts off and you think, oh my God, did the engine just die? Anyway, Terri, we'll get to this in a second. Our guest is Terri Hall. She's the founder and director of Texans Uniting for Reform and Freedom, TURF. A nonpartisan grassroots organization dedicated to advocating for taxpayer-friendly transportation policy and opposing toll roads in Texas. I'm sure you're also approving bullet trains between Dallas and
definitely not.
And we're going to get to this because I did. Forget it. I'm just going to digress. I did the math once. And for the amount of money that they were going to spend to put the bullet train between Houston and Dallas, they could literally just pay for the number of passengers to fly for free from San Antonio, from Dallas. Anyway, it is what it is. So after learning in 2005 of plans to convert a San Antonio freeway into a tollway, and we're probably going to start with that, a homeschool mother, Terri's a homeschool mother, she launched a major grassroots campaign that grew into a statewide movement. Over 2 decades, Hall and TURF have played a pivotal role in halting dozens of toll projects, defeating controversial funding schemes, and pushing for legislative reforms at the state and federal level. And let me ask you this, Terri, as you and I were talking before we came on, you know I'm very familiar with San Antonio. Which of the many roads in San Antonio that are all kinds of confusing were they going to turn into a toll road?
They were going to turn in a whole network of our highways into toll roads in San Antonio. And it was going to start with 281. That kind of became the ground zero for all of the toll projects that Rick Perry was trying to do. And it wasn't just any ordinary toll road. These were going to be privatized toll roads. Yeah. And most of us who are free market conservatives think, what could be wrong with that, right? Right. Well, we all know that when government teams up with big corporations, it's usually a bad deal for the taxpayers. And it was in this case as well. It's basically just public money for private profits. And it's another form of corporate welfare. And so they call them public-private partnerships globally. Here in Texas, they're known as comprehensive development agreements, or CDA. Oh, sure.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, we had to put a stop to all of them. 281 was just kind of the poster child for the whole mess. But they wanted to do it to Loop 1604. They wanted to do it on I-35. Really, they wanted to turn I-35 into the next NAFTA corridor that was going to go all the way from the border of Mexico all the way to the border of Canada. And so, 281 is a U.S. highway that could easily have that same thing. It would go all the way up to Canada. So that was really what this was about. It was about the free trade movement, under the Bushes and the Clintons, they all wanted this stuff. And now that we have President Trump in office, we're seeing between his tariffs and new trade policy, we're getting America First policies back. But we had to stave all of this off in Texas, and it's taken us 20 years to protect Texas from all of this.
The thing that always gets me about privatized toll roads and congestion pricing is that they do it backwards.
Yes.
Because, listen, I'm someone, this is where I'm an elitist. I will say this. When I drive to DC, I live far from DC. I am invariably taking the toll roads, and I will pay the extra money to save the time. And I can afford to do that. I make no bones about this. And I understand that there are people who cannot. And I don't know how familiar you are with the roads around DC, but this is not the one that I normally take. There's a road that goes straight out to the west from DC called Interstate 66.
Oh, yes.
And
I'm very familiar with that one.
sure. And so when they went to congestion pricing on it and made the inside the Beltway a toll road, we were talking about $45 at various
That's
points in
right.
time. And I'm thinking, okay, I get it. I get the idea when it's at the highest demand, okay, that's when we're gonna pay the money. But really, if we're talking about public policy, really when it's at the highest congestion, that's when the price should be the lowest because we're trying to
That's
alleviate
right.
traffic. That's
That's right.
the way it should work. But otherwise, you're right. It is nothing more than it is governmentized, corporatized partnership price gouging in the worst way.
It absolutely is. And it's a monopoly, right? There's only
100%.
one I-66. So there may be alternate routes, but they're not the same as an interstate highway. And
No.
so in fact, when some people were trying to divert, they actually started in the cities around there. We're now trying to make it so that you could have $95 tickets if you cut through the neighborhoods to avoid the toll road. That's
I
how
lived
bad
I lived
the
on the
situation.
eastern shore of Maryland for many years, and so coming in, there's a bridge that goes essentially from the eastern shore to Annapolis, and invariably on the weekends, there's massive traffic, and folks try to divert over onto the local roads there, and that's a huge thing, and it again becomes a revenue maker. That's the other interesting thing because. I'm sure you are like me. You're a conservatarian, quasi-libertarian, but you recognize the real world that's out there. It's like you get all of these things that Reason Magazine talks about in terms of localities who use traffic tickets as a way to create revenue. Oh my God! And you and I, the next thing I'm going to turn to is speed cameras because I'm sure you're dealing with that. But But at the same time, they decry, the sheriff hiding behind the speed sign that is itself hidden and making revenue that way. They're all about the price gouging cronyism that's out there, which is amazing to me. I mean, let me turn your attention there to the issue of the highway, the speed cameras, because I'll never forget. Right, COVID. DC has speed cameras everywhere.
Yes,
but during
do.
COVID, 90% of the people who commute into DC every day were not commuting in, and DC was losing revenue. So what did they do on the major thoroughfare coming in from the Northeast, New York Avenue? They lowered the speed limit, which was already artificially low. It's a road that's built for 45-mile-an-hour speeds. They lowered it to 35 to catch all of these speeders.
Of course, yes.
Then they lowered it to 25. And a local news person was like touting this and talking about it. And I emailed her and I said, hey, did you ever think to ask the question as to what the safety problem is? They talk about this. How about they show the numbers? Like, do your math. Show us where there's a safety problem and how that safety problem is alleviated. We all know at the end of the day, this is all about revenue, isn't it?
Of course it is. It absolutely is. And we actually have to deal with these same bills here in the Texas legislature virtually every single session. Now, our legislature only meets every 2 years, so at least we don't have to worry about government every single year of our lives. But when they're in session, this is always a threat. And in fact, one of the bills that keeps coming back that we've had to kill every single session for probably at least the last 15 years has been a bill to lower the speed limits all the way down to 25 miles per hour in anything they name an urban district, which of course, urban district is not even defined in statute anywhere. So that's one of the problems. But then the big problem is they're literally taking out the only section in there that relates to what's really the problem we're talking about, and that takes away the speed study, takes away any engineering or traffic study to justify lowering the speed limit. And that's really what the left wants. They want to come for our cars. They want to make living in your vehicle or being able to use your vehicle for daily living so miserable that they can potentially tax you out of it in order to put you into transit or walking or biking everywhere. And that's ultimately what this is all about. It's just a gimmick to make life miserable for drivers.
Fascinating, because, we talk about dialectic, socialist dialectic, communist dialectic, Marxist dialectic. And one of the things is you create the problem and then government is the solution of the problem.
Fix the problem.
Right. That they're going to fix the problem. So bike lanes, for instance, and I know you've been talking about New York City, which is obviously near and dear to it's near and dear to my heart because I grew up there. The congestion zone pricing issue. Yeah,
The rollout was terrible.
yeah,
Even the working class, typical blue voters of New York are completely revolting
right.
on the entire congestion pricing scheme because everyone sees it for what it is. It's a tax grab. And it's all to improve their mass transit system, which is already on its last legs. And that's all
Yeah.
they're doing is using
And
taxing drivers to subsidize transit.
the sad thing is that New York, even as decrepit as the system was, it was at one point a very usable system because
Right.
people
You could
were
use it. It
paying.
was useful.
Yeah. It's funny because I grew up. I had a mother who never liked to, certainly never wanted to take cabs in New York. But also didn't want to take the subway, not because of safety issues, but because she felt we should all walk everywhere, which is, as Stephen Wright said, everywhere is within walking distance if you have the time. So we would make the time to walk the multi-miles from where my dad worked down into Midtown. But that's the thing. My dad would extol for many, many years, has extolled the virtues of the New York City subway system as a
Not
great
so
way to move
today,
people.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
now crime is really the biggest deterrent to
Well,
transit.
crime, but also the reliability. I mean,
Well,
it's
that's
just,
huge.
I mean,
Yes.
that's the thing at the end of the day. It's the same thing with the DC Metro system, right? Which when they started slacking off on cracking down on people eating in the metro, that was sort of the beginning of the end. And then,
Right.
fare evaders and things like that. But really, and they've also, right, again, it's dialectic. They've done it to themselves. They've made it more expensive to run these systems. They've made it more expensive to repair these systems. And so they need ever increasing amounts of money. And the way they do it, as you said, is they put it
Tax
on the
drivers.
backs of the
That's
commuters
right.
and
The people that
and the
don't use it
drivers.
are the ones that are paying for it. And
Right.
that's what's completely messed up about the entire system. And then there's also this move, and I know that you are aware of this because you were mentioning it because Lee
Yeah.
Zeldin actually fixed one of these problems, right? The start stop in cars is now finally going to not be
God.
a mandate. And that's the first thing I do in every rental car I ever have is find where do I turn all this stuff off?
Wait,
I
wait,
don't want
wait.
my
I can turn it
manuals.
off? Wait, you're
I
telling me I
don't,
can turn it
yes.
off when I get on a
Press
rental
the
car?
button, turn off the start stop. I want everything turned off. I just want to drive, and not have
This
nanny
is
state
like
in my
me with my
car.
cell phone. I make sure that I get no sound notifications
That's
on
right.
anything. But okay, so there, I'm sorry, you've now blown my mind today. I was today years old when I learned out you can turn this off. Where is this button in these cars, or do you have to look for it?
Well, you have to look for them. Sometimes I'm literally on the phone with the rental car company saying, turn this off or get me a new car. So they're like walking me through how to
Yep.
do it. Every car is a little bit different. The one I'm actually in right now with a rental car, it's a Kia.
Yeah.
And it's just got a button. You just
There
press
you
the button.
go.
You have to do it every single time you start the car. It's
Oh,
not like you
sure.
turn it off and disengage once. It's like every time. So we're glad to start going toward that movement of
But
driving
talk
freedom
about
again.
what Lee Zeldin did this week because it was, this is something that I wish
It's
I'd known
huge.
on Wednesday. But talk about it,
So it's basically taking away these government mandates to do this start stop.
among
Apparently,
other
they think
things.
it's
Yeah.
environmentally friendly to have your car basically have the engine cut while you're stopped at a stoplight, supposedly to reduce emissions, right?
Right.
That's what it's all supposed to be about. But the starting and stopping is actually the hardest part on your car. Like that's the thing that wears
Right.
out
Of
your engine
course.
the most. So it's actually going to create almost like pitching cars to the curb way sooner than they really
Right.
need to be, or
It's
huge repairs on a car, like an engine replacement, which
it's
most people aren't going to do. And that just makes it, fill our recycling yards with all kinds of scrap metal and cars and parts that the environmentalists don't like either. And it's all because of their policies. This is
and at
all
the
down
end of the
the end
day,
of their policies.
to make the driving experience miserable. It's
Yeah,
about,
and more
as we talk
expensive.
about the issue of you set if you have one particular policy goal in mind and you skew all policy towards that goal, the
Right.
unintended consequences are going to be miserable, right? So
Yes.
if your one goal is, well, if your one goal is a carbon-free energy system, then there are all kinds of things that happen. And then if you add to it a carbon-free energy system that doesn't involve nuclear, that's a problem.
Yes. Well, net
And
zero, that's what
right,
that's
right,
all about.
right.
And then
And
Vision Zero. I don't know if your audience is aware of Vision Zero. It's very big in DC, and I'm sure it is in New York, and they have it in many of our cities here in Texas too. It's basically an advocacy group that is, of course, radical environmentalists. Ultimately, they don't want anyone to own cars, and their policies are basically envisioning zero fatalities. Okay, There's no world in where we're going to have zero fatalities
Right.
because we're a fallen world and you can't take out all human error. As much as Elon Musk would like to do that with a lot of his cars,
Right.
it's impossible to do. And we have to realize now we want to mitigate that as much as we can. We want to make sure we drive as safe as we can. Nobody's out there trying to kill pedestrians unless you're a terrorist. And so, we need to temper the temperature in the room with these groups that are just thinking that they have these utopian net zero vision zero. It's not realistic in the real world when you put it down to brass tacks and what it takes to drive around our country.
Also, Terry, I mean, not for nothing, right? But this is how we now get cars that if you look at the car the wrong way, the car crumples, right? And it costs $1,000 to fix. I mean, right? We're trying to make cars safer, especially now that we've gotten cars that are going to be lighter so that they use less gas, again, because we're moving towards this environmentalist utopia.
So and now ask how well they handle a collision, right?
Right, that's the thing, right? So you look at them wrong. Safe. And it caught. Listen, I've gone through this. You bump something. I know in my old Chevy Impala diesel wagon,
there you go. Indestructible.
Literally indestructible, and both in the good and bad. Even if I wanted to destroy it, I couldn't destroy it.
There you go. You couldn't.
It's like a puppy.
Now like my 9-year-old on a bike could basically crush one of these cars.
Well, it's the joke we used to have about the Yugo, right? I used to do a whole thing with the Yugo where a buddy of mine, he did a bike trip across the country. We're teenagers. And I did this whole mock thing where his parents called, his parents got a call. Yeah. Yugo hit your son. No, he's fine. No, the car's totaled. No, he's perfectly okay. But the driver, we're not sure about the driver, the Yugo. And
that's right. The Yugo.
Yes, of course. So, but let's talk about we talk about the start stop, but there's something more pernicious that has been at work, isn't it? Which is the remote kill switch. And this is why I was really excited to bring you on. Talk to us about how that came about and where things stand with it.
Oh, absolutely. So some of us will remember, if we follow transportation like I do, the Biden infrastructure bill. It passed the first year he was in office. This was in fall of 2021. A handful of rhino Republicans, if you want to call them that, voted with all the Democrats on an up or down vote. There was no debate. There was no amendments. It was all that, Pelosi crammed down. And so lots of people didn't even know what was in it. Honestly, the House was really miffed because their bill wasn't used. It was the text of the Senate bill that got used. They basically got no input in this bill. It's called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA for short. And we found out later, like when we were going through this bill, I really didn't find out about it until the following summer, that there was this technology under the Advanced Impaired Driving Technology section, basically presumably under drunk driving or impaired driving.
Right. Because that's the pretext.
That's
got to get rid of these drunk drivers that are out there.
That's right. And so what this does, it literally says,
Terry, how can you be in favor of allowing drunk drivers to drive a car? How dare you? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, and we know that's not what this is about, right? This is about government control inside your car. And really, it's going to unleash a government surveillance state in our vehicles because it involves passively monitoring the bill's text. Now it's law. I call it a bill, but it's the law now. Yeah. It literally says that the technology gives the government the power to passively monitor every person in their vehicle to see if there could be impairment detected. So that means they're going to have driver-facing cameras that can pick up pretty much any action that's taking place in your vehicle at all times. So somebody's got to be monitoring your face, if your eyes look like you're getting sleepy, or if I guess presumably there's a certain behavior when you're drunk that they're trying to detect. And it literally says if impairment may be detected. It's not even if it is detected. If they think that you're even remotely impaired, they can cut power to your car and cease operation of your car. So that means it's a remote kill switch, right? There's a lot of people that say, what are you talking about, a kill switch? There's nothing in the law that says there's a kill switch. Well, that's because we can make deductions based on what the law 100%. Says. If you can monitor me, and if you think I'm impaired, you can cut power to my car. Well, that's a remote kill switch.
Also, we know that at the end of the day, today's pilot program becomes tomorrow's, test. Anyway, it always expands. Government always expands. Very rarely does it contract. We're seeing that happen
today now. Impaired driving, but tomorrow it might be for a COVID lockdown.
So I mean, and that's it. If they open it there and we can't push back on it until after it happens, right? At the end of the day, it's, the Biden administration implements, or the Trump administration, frankly, implements the lockdown. And it's Gavin Newsom pulls
That's
surfers
right.
off of their surfboards, they can't challenge it until it's down the road. I mean, let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So they want to know how many miles you're driving, which means they want to know how much gas you're consuming. They want to know how they want to have a camera in your car so they can turn it off while you're not there, or while you're in it and while you're driving if they don't like the way you're doing it. Presumably, we know that they are buying data as to where you're going here. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
there. Am I missing something here? Am
No.
I overstating
And
it?
it's more than just the cameras. It
Yeah.
actually says in the draft rule, you all know about this government speak for sure, but they released the draft rule on this. This is the National Transportation Highway Safety Administration, or NHTSA, in the fall, December of 2023. And it literally says it involves cameras facing the
Yeah.
driver, but it also involves breath detection in your
Sure.
car. So this is like an ambient air monitoring system in your car. Well, what if you're
Okay.
not the drunk driver? What if it's someone in your car that's had a
Time-
few to drink and
Right.
you're the designated driver?
Time out. I will say, if they could tell me when my breath stinks and offer me a mint, I'm okay with that.
That would be
I'm okay
helpful.
with that. That would actually be helpful. No,
That would
I
actually be
obviously I don't
useful,
want
right?
that.
But
Yes.
but I mean, can you imagine? And then of course lane monitoring. That's pretty
Right.
basic because we already see these lane assists that are kind of standard on
Right.
most new vehicles.
Yes.
But all of those things would be coalesced together to create a profile. And we think that this is all part of that social scoring system that you see in the
The social
Party.
credit. Yeah, sure.
And that
Social
this
crediting.
has to do with
Absolutely.
social credits of how well you're driving today, Andrew. You know, this is what they're going to do. They're going to create profiles on us ultimately using this technology and the data they
This is the
harvest.
thing that gets me, right? I get skeeved out when the insurance companies want to, put a little thing in my car to detect how I'm driving. That bothers me. It's interesting because it gets to something that a colleague of mine said a few years back on the radio. He was on the air railing about 23andMe and these other sort of DNA things. And he says, if the government came to you and said, we want a sample of your DNA, all of these things would happen. But if someone says, pay me $100
Right.
to tell you
Suddenly,
about yourself on the DNA, all
they
of a
think you
sudden
should
you're
part with
okay
it.
with it going
That's
into
right.
a DNA database. And so it's the same thing here, right? Because there are moments, right? Because I drive to DC once a week at least. Usually it's 2.5 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours each way, depending on when I go. There are moments where I would love to have a self-driving car, but I also know all of that data is going somewhere.
Yes. And the
And
downside of all that.
somebody
Yes.
else has control over this. And even though it's me making the decision to have this car, I know that there's a down. This is what we're talking about here. All of these things conspire
Absolutely.
together, don't they?
Well, and ultimately, that's another thing that I've had a lot of people approach me with since we went to DC just a few weeks ago, the last week of June, and we heard that from a lot of the members of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee and some of the Senate members on their four various committees that handle different aspects of transportation as well. And that is that there's actually the kill switch is dangerous. We don't want it in our cars. It needs to be repealed, no
Yeah.
question, right? Okay, we need to get this out of statute, and we certainly need the administration's help in making sure they don't finalize the rule until Congress has a chance to act in the reauthorization bill next year. But aside from that, the other issue is that a lot of these cars now, like the self-driving features that you're seeing on the robo-taxis and the things that Elon and Waymo and some of these companies are already rolling out, and even the ones that aren't designed to be self-driving, they have features on them that can still allow them to be hacked. If there is
Right.
a computer in your car at all, and there's over 300 computer chips in most cars now. I don't know
Sure.
if people are aware of that. There's just
Oh,
hundreds
yeah.
of them. Every one of those is a vulnerability that allows a hacker or a bad actor to get into your car and potentially mess with it, drive it for you, or use it for a mass casualty event. Who knows what it could be, but they could crash our cars
Right.
with this vulnerability. And so I think it's beyond just the kill switch at this point. Now, of course, we don't want it because then the government's in control of it. But
Right.
we don't want third-party hackers either. So I think that we talk about cybersecurity so much with in Congress and in public policy in general in all of our states, and there's lots of concerns with that. Why is this not on somebody's
Right.
radar? Why is this not being talked about in Congress? Why are we not having special committees addressing these issues? And I think that autonomous vehicles pose one of the biggest threats to our human agency and our own autonomy, really in this century. It really is a huge threat to our personal autonomy.
Pivot back to this week and Lee Zeldin and the EPA and the companion stuff with the Department of Transportation. Because as you point out, this was in statute, the kill switch issue. I mean, Lee Zeldin said that this was a part of what they were putting out for proposal. I know, at least you don't have a law, you're not a lawyer, but you may
No.
have some understanding of this. So, because if it's statutory, it becomes more difficult to undo. I guess they can sharply curtail what's out there.
And they could not finalize the rule. So this would be under Duffy. It's NHTSA's under Secretary Duffy.
Yeah.
And they could just direct NHTSA to just delay finalizing the rule.
Got it.
Now it is in statute. And so at the end of the day, Congress has to repeal this. That's what this comes down to. We are going to need the president to take action on this. I would love to see a Truth Social post on this from the president himself saying, we're not going to do these kill switches in the cars. If he did that, that would really give us a lot of momentum to help get Congress to act. And this is going to, I mean, our golden opportunity is going to be in the next reauthorization bill, which comes next year. And so I think when it's part of the entire transportation package, it'll be a lot harder for the Democrats to kill it because they all want their road money and all of that. But, you know, we haven't even talked about that part yet. One of the things we did when we met with DST was, look, the Republicans have talked about getting rid of the Federal Transit Administration forever.
Yeah.
And I went in there and said, look, this is your golden opportunity. You guys are trying to get rid of the Department of Education. That's like a much bigger ask than getting rid of the Federal Transit Administration. But are there any federally relevant transit projects anymore? There really is not. There never really has been. So at the end of the day, get rid of that. This is what Republicans generally do, right? They take last year's bill, or in this case, 2021's bill.
Right.
They mark it up a little bit, throw in a few things, add more money, give the transit element to the left and the Democrats as their leave our road money alone. If we give you your transit, you'll vote for us on this road money, and then go on their merry way. They don't ever make cuts. They don't get rid of agencies that we don't need. They need to doge transportation, just like they're doging everything else. And we need to get rid of the Federal Transit Administration.
Did Doge come to any conclusions regarding transit projects and how we're going about this? I mean, we did. You're right. They focus so much on the federal workforce and what was happening. Did they make any recommendations when it comes to these?
I am not aware of any, and we need to make sure that happens. Now that Elon's not there, I'm not sure where Doge is at. But we certainly can't stop that work, because that is a huge reason why everyone voted for, not everyone, but, 81, how many millions of people voted for.
But out of the Trump voters, it was
the mandate.
A substantial portion of the Trump voters were all about the substantial change of the government. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
And getting rid of the deep state and helping Main Street, right? That's what it's about. It's like getting rid of the deep state and Wall Street and helping the ordinary citizen. And we actually gave them an idea of what to name the next reauthorization bill. We said, hey, we think the president would like this. Make driving affordable again.
Yeah. Or just make driving great again. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
It's
and make it enjoyable again.
Right.
Because that's like the start-stop switch, this kill switch, all of these things, the big nanny state that's in all these vehicles now. We'd like to see low-tech freedom cars, and we'd love Trump to start making them. I think he should get into the car making business and do a freedom car.
Isn't it interesting? You bring this up because the left was driven to distraction when first Ford versus Ferrari came out, the movie with Matt Damon and Christian Bale. And then F1, when that came out a few months ago, again, there were not whispers, hues and cries, screams of anger from the left about how, why do we continue to glorify car driving? And of course,
it's the symbol of American freedom.
Ultimately, and this is
why.
No, it's interesting because this is exactly all of what you're talking about here. The kill switches, the surveillance, the cameras, the ability of the government to turn off your car. One of the things I used to talk about was, because I have a degree in Soviet studies, Russian studies, that we could make Russia free, right, in the post-Soviet Union. But it's not just that all of the Russians need the cars, but the infrastructure that gets into, America, the gas stations in the middle of nowhere, Wall Drug, being out there, get a free ice water if you stop in and get your thing. Your Route 66, right? The great driving highways that are
huge economic boom when the interstate highway system was built by Eisenhower in the 50s. It was the biggest economic boom at that time in American history because of all of that organic economic benefit that happens. All the hotels, the restaurants, all of those things popped up alongside our interstate highways. And that's still some of the most expensive real estate in the country today.
Right. But, at the end of the day, right, with Russia they could control movement by not selling private gas
That's right.
and
You were trapped inside your 15-minute city.
right. If you didn't know what road you were on, you shouldn't be on it, was one of the rules of the day. In America, obviously, that's not the case, and there's so much value. Anyway, not that I need to go down the sociological road, pun intended. But so much value in driving 50 miles away from wherever you live and having a conversation with somebody, which is a core value that I really believe in. And we're now at a point in America where, and I didn't say this earlier, you have 10 kids, I'm sure of varying ages, but how
29 down to 9.
Okay. So I know with my kids, one of them was really agnostic about getting their driver's license until COVID hit, and then they realized they were stuck here with us. And as soon as they could get their license,
so they needed some freedom.
Right. And the other one wanted that freedom immediately. But I know literally conversation at dinner last night where a dad was lamenting about his daughter not wanting to get her license. Why do I need my license? And we're all those of us of a certain age are sitting here going, well, we want you to get your license so we don't have to drive you everywhere.
That's right. Exactly.
There used to be a point. I mean, this was a rite of passage, getting your license, getting in the car.
It is for my kids. The first thing all my kids want here in Texas is a pickup truck.
Well, yes. Yes.
That's like number one importance on their radar when they're
my older one,
15-year-old trying to buy a pickup right now. 15. I'm like, you're not even old enough to drive. Doesn't matter, Mom. I need a pickup.
And wanting something that is reliable. I don't know how you feel about Toyotas. Not that I want to turn this into a Toyota commercial.
Well, hey, Toyota San Antonio, it's a big job center for San Antonio.
Oh, that's right.
So a lot of Texans do like Toyota, and they love their Tundras.
Listen, I was when I what the hell? I was a minivan driver for 17 years, and I loved my minivan.
All of us with families have had to admit that we've been minivan drivers at times.
It's so funny because when it looked like I was going to have to give up my Sienna the first time, I almost had to give up my Sienna. I was test driving it, and we were thinking about something else. In fact, looking at Tacomas and looking at Tundras, and what we wanted. And I got into the minivan, and I said to my wife, "This is pretty all that I want. I feel like such an idiot." And she's like, "No, it's fine. You love what you love." But so we looked at the Tundra, what is it? The 17, 18, whatever it was, the fun one. We went with the used FJ Cruisers. We now are buying a lot of used stuff. But again, it's the same kind of a thing. You want something rugged that's going to go, that is simple and not expensive to fix, and doesn't, if you can get it without a bunch of microchips in it, that's the way you want to go.
Low tech and freedom cars, without the surveillance, without the nanny state government in your car. And it's driving people crazy. It honestly is. I hear it a lot when I'm at these rental car places. They're just like, oh yeah, that's the number one request we have, is to get a car that doesn't have any of this stuff in it.
Right.
And I think they're just as frustrated because they want to please their customers. They don't want people to be upset with every car they rent. And I think the automakers need to start catching up with the time it is in America. We're done with nanny state. We're tired of insurance companies and big government determining what goes in our car and how we are allowed to drive or not. And that's the bottom line.
At the end of the day, they are as well. I mean, they want to return to a time where they can offer products that customers actually want.
That's right.
And so the other part of this,
the EV mandate, right?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. I mean, the other part of all of what the EPA announced this week was essentially a return to normal more generally on cars that use gasoline, and not having this, essentially the as Marlo Lewis at the Competitive Enterprise Institute says, the nationalization of California's EV plan. This is important. Talk about this before we sort of move on to more fun things. But talk about EVs and the mandate.
Because what we found out, you saw the huge, quarterly losses, multi-billion-dollar quarterly losses at Ford and other, GM. All of them are just losing money hand over fist on their EV fleets because the government was artificially forcing and trying to put its finger on the scale of EVs, trying to force everybody into them through the mandates, of course, because it wasn't happening naturally fast enough for what their taste was in the free market. And they basically saturated the market with cars that nobody wanted to buy.
Right.
And in order to offset the losses in their EV fleets, that's when you started to see the price of regular gas-powered cars go through the roof.
Right.
And it's all because of the government coming in, putting their thumb on the scales in favor of one style of vehicle over another. And now it's completely thrown off the cost of a car in America. So I think now
not just new cars, right? Used cars as well.
That's right. Same thing happened to the used car market. And so we're seeing, I mean, with the price of cars having nearly doubled in some cases, I mean, they've gone up tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Car insurance went up 42% in just 2 years under Biden. That's why we have the hashtag out there on a lot of the posts you'll see on our TX Turf, TXTURF X, follow us on X. You see a lot of that on our posts because it's about making driving affordable again. We have got to make driving affordable again. And this is one of the reasons why it's become unaffordable is because of government intervention.
In the same way, right? When you force doctors to have more patients, right? When you create greater demand for physicians, and obviously, and you don't increase the number of physicians, and so physicians are taking more time. They have less time with patients, so their liability goes up, and we're not changing the liability that's out there. Is it any wonder that more doctors are getting out? It's the same thing with cars, right? When you make cars more complicated and more expensive to fix internally, you also make them easier for the external parts to break, right? Is it any wonder that the insurance is going to go up for these cars?
Well, I mean, it's all these nanny state things they're putting in our cars. It's very expensive. This technology is incredibly expensive to develop. It's incredibly expensive to fix and to keep in good repair. And so that's all those costs that drive everybody crazy. It's like, I get that I have to replace my brakes every now and then, and that I have to do like normal maintenance to get tires replaced. But to have to get all these little microchips that now your entire car doesn't work, your air conditioner stops working because you have a windshield wiper problem. I mean, that's like everything's so interconnected now that they make it so ungodly expensive to get to the part you need, to the thing that actually needs to get fixed on your car, that, like you said, you even look the direction of your car and it's $1,000.
It's astounding.
Which are kids that are entering the job market, because I have a lot of kids in a whole different range, right? So I have 29-year-olds, I have 5 that are adults, I have 5 that are still at home that I'm homeschooling and still have here at home. And so I see that whole range, and I see all the different struggles that each generation is facing as they come out into the world, so to speak. And one of the big things about this with these, with the affordability of cars, imagine this, we have these kids that are in entry-level jobs. So they're just starting out, they're in high school. They have to pay for their own car insurance and all their own cars, and they can't fix their cars to get to work when you're making minimum wage and in school full time. How are you even going to keep a car running at this point with the cost of insurance and repair of cars? It's out of control. And we've got to start tamping back the government interventions and regulations that have just choked the auto industry.
I just had this conversation with my younger one, who's had a couple of different problems with the car that we got for them a couple of years ago. We went used, but we bought a slightly more expensive, a model that would have been more expensive, 8 years when it was new. And I said to her, this was a self-inflicted wound on our part, right? We could have gotten you this other one, we could have stayed with Toyota, and we were within the Toyota family, not to get even more specifics, but we wound up not thinking it through, and repairs are all 4 times more expensive. Whereas with our other child's, 10-year-old FJ, we maintain it, and it has breakdowns on certain things, but it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, right? When I'm replacing the battery on it, it's the battery replacement, and it's, you pull it out and you put it back in.
That's right.
It's not hard to do. Terri, before we let you go, I always ask guests this question. And with you, I think it's going to be really interesting. Actually, I'm going to do 2 questions here.
All right.
So normally I ask my guests about their outside interests. When they're not doing this kind of work, what are we up to? I know we've talked about the fact that you're homeschooling, you spend a lot of time with family. If there are other things as well, if you have the time for it, some of your other outside interests. But then I'm going to add to this, when you have 10 kids, I'm sure you don't go out to eat all that often. When you go out to eat in the greater San Antonio area, where should we be going? Tex-Mex, barbecue, diner, what should we be doing? But talk about your outside interests, but also talk a little bit about where you live.
Absolutely. So it is hard to have outside interests when you do any kind of volunteer grassroots public advocacy, public policy, because all you're ever doing
your outside interest.
is reading bills and attending, boring transportation committee hearings and watching all the testimony and all of that. But aside from all of that, we also are involved in two wonderful organizations because we have sons and daughters, right? So we have Trail Life USA, if you've ever heard of that. It's basically a Christian scouting program. We also do American Heritage Girls. I happen to be the troop coordinator for one of the San Antonio troops that we participate in. Yes, in addition to that. And so we also run a local grassroots group that just watchdogs our local government here. I'm in Kirk County where the floods just happened. I actually live basically on the border of Ingram and Hunt, Texas. So our river is really in distress right now. Our people are very much in distress. We're a community in crisis. So there's a lot going on with that. A lot of volunteer work at our church with Samaritan's Purse and other organizations that have swooped in and helped our community rebuild. So there's a lot of that going on right now. But besides that, we love to camp. I love Christian music. I love to go to concerts with my kids.
Time
it's
out.
really fun.
Camp?
Young again.
Are we talking tent camping or are we talking trailer?
Tent camping. We don't do glamping. We do actual tent camping. And every now and then our sons and my husband will go out and do actual backpacking. Like literally like everything you have on your back is all you've got all weekend. So there's that too.
Dying to take my nephews backpacking. Dying to do that.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. So we love doing all of that in the outdoors. We love to take good hikes. One of our favorite places ever, and I have to say this in a whisper because I live in Texas and have been here over 20 years now. Sure. But I grew up in California. Oh. Texans do not like California.
Where in California?
I'm really conservative. I've proven myself now. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of Californians that have come to Texas.
Where in California?
San Jose, which is the Silicon Valley. And so we just loved, and even then, even though we didn't have a big family, we were very much a middle-class family and couldn't afford a lot of fancy vacations. So we did a lot of camping.
Okay. Oh, all right. Hold on. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Because you weren't in San Jose. You were south, you were west or east of San Jose because you can't go west of San Jose. Where were you?
Kind of the south side. We were, a lot of our friends' dads all worked at IBM. My dad worked actually in the aerospace industry doing IT for a while.
Okay.
But we were just on the other side of the mountains from Gilroy. I don't know if you know where that is. Yes, we're right up against the foothills there.
You do know. All right,
that's where I grew up.
We're going to geek out for a bit here. Hold on, folks. Sorry, but you're going to indulge me for a moment.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you know this, but the Gilroy Garlic Festival came back this year.
Yes,
which was amazing. We didn't go, obviously. We were here, but we always used to stop in Garlic World. Which is, right where, just south of Gilroy on the 101. And we send a random.
How about Casa de Fruta? Did you ever go to that?
Oh, you are now hitting on a touchstone of my childhood.
Okay, there you go.
Past south of the border. I was obsessed for years because we would make the drive. My grandparents lived in the Monterey Peninsula. We would make the drive across the valley to Yosemite, and we would see. And I would beg my parents because we would see the signs, for Casa de Fruta, and I would beg my parents to stop there, and they would never want to stop there. Yeah, no, exactly. They would never want to stop there. Finally, when I got old enough to do these trips on my own, I would stop at Casa de Fruta. But so I would go backpacking in Big Basin and whatever the.
I lived maybe 40 minutes from Big Basin my whole life.
So whatever the state park is next to Big Basin with the redwoods.
Yes.
So we would camp there too, and then. When I was out there a couple of years ago with the family, we did an amazing. I'm not going to throw this guy under the bus. Found a guy because they stopped doing horseback rides in Big Sur.
Aww.
Found a guy in Prunedale, which, folks, is just south of Gilroy. It's between Gilroy and the Monterey Peninsula. In fact, the turnoff from 101 to 156 to Monterey is Prunedale. And guy met us over in whatever the state park is. He's like, oh. We're going to tell them your family because I'm not allowed to bring trail rides in here. And we did this amazing trail ride through the redwoods there, which if you ever get back out there with family, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It was just.
I have two girls that went to Shriner University here in Kerrville, and they were on the Shriner equestrian team. So we have some serious equestrian horse enthusiasts in our family. I have a son now that's an equine ambassador for State 4-H here in Texas.
Fun.
So They all do horse judging. We're very into equine everything.
So we love riding horses when we're on vacation. We did discover a couple of years ago that for us and the uninitiated, if you only ride horses once a year, 3 hours is about the maximum you can have.
That's
in the
right.
saddle.
You won't be able to handle much more.
Anything more than that is a little bit difficult. But yes, you and I could nerd out over this.
You could totally do that. Yes,
the entire time. Listen,
but I mean,
Terri, again.
Lake Tahoe. I was getting there because I was going to say one of my favorite places ever to camp is Lake Tahoe.
Oh, there you go. Yes, see, I get that. It's so
put
for
it
us,
on everyone's bucket list. If you've
No.
never seen Lake Tahoe, you have not seen God's beauty. You have to go see it before you
see,
retire.
This is we're talking about going back out to California next summer, and I want to go up to the high country, but I think we're going to be out there too early. I think it's going to be before the roads open up. So
the Sierra Nevada mountains are incredible.
Yes, it's again some of my happiest places. But that whole area, I mean, I agree with you, right? I mean, it's just terribly run. But it is, I get out there and I relax.
And we're a big 4-H family. That's the other thing we do.
That's amazing.
Of our time goes to 4-H. Yeah.
That's so cool. So, all right, Terri, how do folks find out more about what you're doing at Texas Turf?
Well, it's public policy, but it's all grassroots. It has to do with transportation and transportation freedom. Obviously, our website is texasturf.org, Texas spelled out, TURF as in freedom.org, texasturf.org. And we also have a political action committee for anyone interested. This is where we can kind of get involved in some races. We do endorsements, and that's our tollfreehighways.com.
Tollfreehighways.com.
No hyphen, just type it all out and you can find us both places. And we would love to have you join the movement because we need people advocating for transportation freedom and helping President Trump make America first and make driving enjoyable again.
Make driving enjoyable again. TexasTurf.org. And I'm sorry, how do folks find you on Twitter?
On X, we are TX Turf.
TX Turf. Very simple and straightforward. TX Turf. I'm now following you there as well. Terri, Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
So this brings us to the close of yet another Federal Newswire Lunch Hour podcast. Our guest has been Terri Hall from Texas Turf. Go and check them out, please. As always, listen, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Let your friends and family members' friends know how much you're enjoying this. Check us out on all the major podcast platforms that are out there and go and check out what's happening in studio. I'm your host, Andrew Langer. Enjoy the rest of your lunch.
This has been the Federal Newswire Lunch Hour Podcast, hosted by Andrew Langer. Check out the Federal Newswire's family of websites, as well as their social media stream.